For a long time, the story of human evolution felt surprisingly simple. Textbooks, documentaries, and museums repeated the same idea. Modern humans replaced earlier groups like Neanderthals, and before them, Homo erectus paved the way out of Africa. Three main characters, a clean, linear narrative, but science rarely stays simple for long. That story began to unravel in the early 21st century. Not with a dramatic skeleton or a perfectly preserved skull, but with something almost insignificant, a tiny fragment of bone. It was a piece of a child's finger, no larger than a raisin, recovered from Denisova cave in southern Siberia. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about it. No obvious traits, no clear clues about age, sex, or even species. Under traditional archaeological standards, it could have been catalogued, boxed, and forgotten among thousands of other fragments. Instead, it quietly triggered one of the most radical shifts in paleoanthropology. When scientists extracted DNA from that small bone, they expected a familiar result. Neanderthal, perhaps early Homo sapiens. What they found instead didn't match anything known. The genetic signature belonged to a completely unknown human lineage, not modern human, not Neanderthal. Something else entirely. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to Primal Roots. That moment marked the birth of the Denisovans, a human group no one had ever identified before, a population that left almost no physical trace, yet turned out to be deeply woven into the genetic history of millions of people alive today. What made the discovery even more unsettling was how little material evidence existed. There were no full skeletons, no recognizable skulls, no clear cultural artifacts stamped with a Denisovan identity, just DNA, ancient, fragmented, but unmistakably human. It forced scientists to accept an uncomfortable truth. Entire branches of humanity had existed, thrived, and vanished without leaving the kinds of traces we usually rely on to reconstruct the past. And Denisovans were not marginal. Genetically, they were as distinct from Homo sapiens as Neanderthals were. This meant modern humans didn't just encounter one other human species as they spread across Eurasia. They encountered several. Human evolution wasn't a straight line. It was a crowded landscape. Shortly after the finger bone discovery, another clue emerged from the same cave: a massive molar tooth. Larger and more robust than anything seen in modern humans, and unlike typical Neanderthal teeth, DNA confirmed it belonged to the same mysterious population. That was it. A finger bone and a tooth. From those fragments alone, scientists were expected to reconstruct the existence of an entire human species that had occupied large parts of Asia for tens of thousands of years. Naturally, questions multiplied. How could a population spread across such vast territory leave behind almost no fossils? Why were there no clearly identifiable Denisovan tools or settlements? How did they survive in environments ranging from icy Siberian forests to high-altitude mountain regions? And perhaps most puzzling of all, how did a group so nearly invisible in the archaeological record leave such a strong genetic footprint in modern humans? The answers would not come easily. Denisova Cave itself offered the next major surprise. Among the fragmented remains, researchers identified the bones of a teenage girl who lived roughly 90,000 years ago. Her DNA told an extraordinary story. Her mother was Neanderthal, her father Denisovan. This was not speculation or statistical inference. It was direct evidence of interbreeding between different human species. This single individual shattered the outdated idea that ancient human groups were isolated, hostile, or incapable of mixing. Instead, it revealed a world where multiple human lineages overlapped, interacted, and exchanged genes over long periods of time. Denisovans were not rare anomalies. They were part of a broader human network. As genetic studies expanded, their hidden influence became impossible to ignore. Populations in Papua New Guinea, Melanesia, Australia, and parts of Southeast Asia carry some of the highest levels of Denisovan DNA found anywhere, in some cases up to 5 or 6%. That is not a minor trace. It represents repeated encounters and deep integration. One genetic contribution stood out above all others. Modern Tibetans possess a unique version of a gene called EPAS1, which allows the body to function efficiently in low oxygen environments at extreme altitudes. Without it, living above 4,000 meters places enormous strain on the heart and lungs. Genetic analysis revealed that this adaptation did not originate in Homo sapiens. It was inherited from Denisovans. In other words, long before modern humans settled the Tibetan plateau, Denisovans were already living there, hunting, surviving, and adapting to thin air where most humans would struggle to breathe. This wasn't a short-term experiment. Such adaptations require thousands of years of intense natural selection. Denisovans weren't visitors to extreme environments. They were specialists. That realization transformed how scientists viewed them. Denisovans were no longer seen as obscure cave dwellers or genetic footnotes. They were resilient, flexible, and biologically innovative, a population capable of surviving in environments that would eliminate less adaptable groups. So why did they remain so archaeologically invisible? One explanation lies in their lifestyle. Denisovans likely lived in small, highly mobile groups spread across enormous territories. Instead of building permanent structures or returning repeatedly to the same sites, they may have followed seasonal resources, leaving behind only scattered traces. In such conditions, bones decay, tools disperse, and archaeological signatures fade quickly, especially in harsh climates. Another factor is environment. Many regions Denisovans likely occupied, tropical forests, high mountains, acidic soils, are among the worst places on Earth for fossil preservation. Heat, moisture, and erosion destroy bone rapidly. Entire populations can pass through these landscapes and leave almost nothing behind, yet subtle hints of their technology still exist. Artifacts recovered from Denisova Cave include finely crafted stone blades, worked bone tools, and polished ornaments, such as a green stone bracelet drilled with remarkable precision. Microscopic analysis suggests techniques far more advanced than expected for the period, possibly involving rapid rotational drilling. While these objects cannot be definitively assigned to Denisovans, their presence in layers associated with Denisovan DNA strongly suggests they were not technologically primitive. They were innovators operating quietly, outside the spotlight of history. As genomic research advanced, another surprising discovery emerged. Denisovans were not a single uniform population. Genetic evidence indicates at least 3 distinct Denisovan lineages, separated by geography and time, as different from one another as Neanderthals were from modern humans. One lineage contributed genes to Himalayan populations. Another left a strong genetic signal in Southeast Asia and Oceania. A third appears to have lived farther north, interacting with early Homo sapiens in Siberia. This level of diversity suggests a long evolutionary history across Asia, shaped by migration, isolation, and adaptation. And then came an even deeper mystery. Certain segments of Denisovan DNA do not match Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, or any other known hominin. This implies Denisovans themselves interbred with an unknown human species, a population that has left no fossils, no tools, no name. Our ghost lineage, visible only through genetic echoes. Human evolution, it seemed, was far messier than anyone had imagined. The Denisovans enter history not through monuments or skeletons, but through silence, broken only when modern technology allowed ancient DNA to speak. They emerge as shadow figures who walked alongside Neanderthals and modern humans, shared landscapes, exchanged genes, and helped shape who we are today. They didn't vanish without impact. They vanished without being seen. And that is only the beginning of their story. As Denisovans slowly emerged from genetic shadows, a new paradox became impossible to ignore. Their physical remains were scarce to the point of near absence, yet their genetic influence stretched across half the planet. From the frozen highlands of Central Asia to the humid islands of the Pacific, traces of their DNA appeared again and again, embedded within modern populations separated by thousands of kilometers. No other archaic human group showed this combination of extreme invisibility in the fossil record and extraordinary reach in the human genome. The first major clues came from Oceania. Genetic surveys revealed that populations in Papua New Guinea, Melanesia, and parts of Australia carried unusually high proportions of Denisovan ancestry. This was not a single accidental encounter, but the result of repeated and sustained interbreeding events. The implication was unavoidable. Denisovans were not confined to Siberia. They had moved far south, occupying regions once thought unreachable for archaic humans. This realization forced a rethinking of ancient migration models. Denisovans were not marginal survivors clinging to cold refuges. They were geographically expansive, capable of adapting to radically different ecosystems. Tropical rainforests, coastal plains, temperate valleys, and extreme mountain environments all appear within the probable range of Denisovan occupation. To survive across such diverse landscapes, they would have needed remarkable physiological flexibility and behavioral intelligence. Southeast Asia deepened the mystery even further. Indigenous groups in the Philippines, particularly the Aita Magbukon, were found to carry even higher levels of Denisovan DNA than Melanesian populations, previously considered the strongest genetic link. This discovery suggested that Denisovan contact with Homo sapiens occurred in multiple regions, not just along a single migration corridor. Instead of one population center, Denisovans likely consisted of several semi-independent groups scattered across Asia, each interacting with modern humans at different times and places. Such a pattern points to long-term coexistence rather than brief encounters. Denisovans were already established across Asia when Homo sapiens arrived. As modern humans expanded eastward, they did not enter empty lands, but stepped into territories occupied by other human lineages, including Denisovans, Neanderthals, and possibly additional groups now lost to time. Asia during the Pleistocene was not a frontier. It was a crossroads. Among all Denisovan contributions to modern humanity, none illustrates their impact more clearly than their role in high-altitude adaptation. The Tibetan Plateau represents one of the most biologically hostile environments humans have ever inhabited. Oxygen levels are dangerously low, temperatures are extreme, and food resources are limited. Yet modern Tibetan populations thrive there with minimal physiological stress. This ability is tied to a specific genetic variant affecting oxygen regulation in the blood. That variant did not evolve within Homo sapiens. Genetic analysis shows it entered the modern human gene pool through Denisovan ancestry. This means Denisovans were living and adapting at extreme altitudes long before sapiens arrived. Their bodies had already solved the biological problem of hypoxia through generations of natural selection. Such adaptation is neither quick nor accidental. It requires prolonged exposure and intense selective pressure over thousands of years. Denisovans were not merely passing through mountain regions, they were long-term residents, shaping their biology to environments that would later challenge modern humans. In this sense, Denisovans acted as biological pioneers, passing down survival solutions that sapiens would later rely on. Beyond altitude, Denisovan genes appear to have influenced immune responses, fat metabolism, and skin physiology in modern populations. Some of these genetic fragments improve resistance to pathogens common in tropical environments, while others affect how the body responds to cold or regulates energy. Their legacy is not symbolic. It is functional, continuing to influence how millions of people interact with their environments today. Yet despite these deep biological contributions, Denisovans remain archaeologically elusive. Unlike Neanderthals, who left behind recognizable tool traditions and repeated occupation sites, Denisovans appear to have left little material culture that can be confidently attributed to them. One explanation lies in preservation bias. Many regions where Denisovans likely lived, tropical forests, high mountains, acidic soils, are hostile to fossilization. Bone decays rapidly, and stone tools are often displaced or destroyed. Another explanation centers on mobility. Denisovans may have favored a highly nomadic lifestyle, following migrating animals or seasonal plant resources. Short-term camps leave few traces, especially when revisited infrequently. Without long-term settlements or repeated use of the same locations, archaeological signatures fade quickly. Over tens of thousands of years, such traces can vanish almost completely. Still, Denisova Cave provides tantalizing hints. Stone tools recovered from layers associated with Denisovan DNA display fine workmanship, including blades and worked bone implements that suggest planning and skill. Decorative objects, such as polished stone ornaments, point towards symbolic behavior and aesthetic awareness. Although direct attribution remains uncertain, the technological sophistication of these artifacts challenges any notion that Denisovans were cognitively inferior. Genetic data added another unexpected layer to their story. Denisovans were not a single population. At least 3 distinct Denisovan lineages have been identified, separated by geography and evolutionary history. One lineage interacted with populations ancestral to modern Tibetans. Another contributed heavily to Southeast Asian and Oceanian groups. A third appears linked to Northern Asia, overlapping with Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens. These lineages diverged long enough ago to accumulate substantial genetic differences, indicating that Denisovans had been spread across Asia for a very long time. Their evolutionary success was not brief or localized. It was sustained, adaptive, and complex. Denisovans were not a single chapter, but an entire volume in the story of human evolution. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery came from genomic segments that defied classification altogether. Parts of the Denisovan genome appear to originate from an even older, unidentified human lineage, one that has left no fossils and no clear archaeological record. This suggests Denisovans themselves interbred with another archaic species, adding yet another layer to the tangled human family tree. This revelation reframes Denisovans as genetic intermediaries, positioned at the center of multiple evolutionary exchanges. They absorbed genes from unknown humans and later passed adapted variants to Homo sapiens. Rather than isolated relics, they functioned as connectors, linking different branches of humanity across time and space. The disappearance of Denisovans remains difficult to pinpoint. Unlike Neanderthals, whose decline roughly coincides with the expansion of Homo sapiens in Europe, Denisovans vanish without a clear timeline. Their populations may have declined at different times in different regions, gradually absorbed through interbreeding, or lost due to environmental instability and demographic fragility. Small dispersed populations are particularly vulnerable to climate shifts. Sudden changes in temperature, rainfall, or food availability can eliminate entire groups. As Homo sapiens expanded with growing population density, social complexity, and increasingly efficient technology, Denisovans may have faced mounting competition for resources. Even without direct conflict, ecological pressure alone could have driven their gradual disappearance. Yet extinction in this case is misleading. Denisovans did not vanish entirely. Their genes persist, shaping human biology in subtle but meaningful ways. In some regions, Denisovan ancestry provided immediate advantages, allowing sapiens to survive environments that might otherwise have been lethal. Their biological solutions became humanity's inheritance. This chapter of their story reveals Denisovans not as footnotes but as architects of adaptation. Humans who mastered extremes, spread widely, and left behind a legacy written not in stone but in DNA. They challenge the idea that visibility equals importance and remind us that much of human history unfolded beyond the reach of bones and artifacts. What emerges is a picture of Asia as the most crowded and complex stage of human evolution during the Pleistocene. Multiple human species overlapped, interacted, and influenced one another in ways only now becoming visible. Denisovans stood at the center of this complexity, quietly shaping the future while remaining largely unseen. Their story does not end in disappearance. It continues within the biology of modern humans, a silent testimony to a population that once spanned continents, conquered extremes, and reshaped what it meant to be human, without ever leaving a clear trace of their faces behind. As Denisovans became increasingly visible through genetic evidence, one question remained stubbornly unresolved. What did they actually look like? Unlike Neanderthals or early Homo sapiens, Denisovans left no complete skulls, no recognizable skeletons, no physical reference that could anchor their appearance in bone. Their bodies, like much of their history, had vanished almost entirely. Yet science found another path forward, one that did not rely on fossils, but on molecular traces encoded deep within ancient DNA. By analyzing patterns of DNA methylation, chemical markers that regulate how genes are expressed, researchers developed ways to infer physical traits from genetic material alone. When Denisovan methylation patterns were compared with those of modern humans and Neanderthals, a rough anatomical outline began to emerge. The results suggested broad skulls, robust jaw structures, and large teeth, consistent with the massive molar discovered in Denisova Cave. Their faces were likely strong and wide, with powerful chewing muscles, reflecting a biology adapted to demanding diets and harsh environments. These anatomical hints pointed toward a population shaped by extreme conditions. Powerful jaws imply the regular processing of tough foods, fibrous plants, dried meat, or marrow extracted from bone. In high altitude and cold regions, such diets would have been essential for survival, providing dense calories in landscapes where resources were scarce and seasonal. Denisovans were not delicately built specialists. They appear to have been physically resilient humans optimized for endurance rather than speed. Dietary reconstruction supports this view. Chemical analysis of sediments and animal remains from Denisova Cave indicates that its occupants hunted a wide range of prey, from deer and wild goats to larger herbivores now extinct. This suggests flexible hunting strategies rather than reliance on a single food source. In unpredictable environments, such adaptability is often the key to long-term survival. Denisovans seem to have understood this well. The discovery of a Denisovan-Neanderthal hybrid added another dimension to their story. The remains belonged to a young adolescent whose genome revealed a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father. This was not an indirect inference, but direct proof of interbreeding between human species. It demonstrated that such encounters were neither rare nor biologically incompatible. On the contrary, they were part of normal human behavior during the Pleistocene. This hybrid individual implied regular contact between populations that had diverged hundreds of thousands of years earlier. Such contact likely involved shared territories, overlapping hunting grounds, and perhaps even social interaction beyond brief encounters. Genetic exchange suggests proximity and tolerance rather than constant hostility. Human evolution unfolded not through isolation alone, but through repeated contact and blending. Cultural exchange likely followed biological interaction. While no tool tradition can be definitively labeled Denisovan, archaeological sites across Asia contain technologies that do not fit neatly into known categories. Some stone tool assemblages show continuity across vast regions, while others reveal unexpected sophistication at early dates. It is increasingly plausible that Denisovans contributed to these technological landscapes, their innovations later absorbed into broader cultural traditions attributed to Homo sapiens or other groups. This possibility challenges a long-standing bias in archaeology, the assumption that modern humans were the sole drivers of innovation. Denisovans lived for tens of thousands of years across varied environments. It would be improbable for such a widespread population to lack cultural complexity. The absence of clearly labeled Denisovan artifacts likely reflects limitations in classification rather than genuine simplicity. Their disappearance, like their appearance, resists simple explanation. Unlike Neanderthals, whose extinction roughly aligns with the expansion of Homo sapiens into Europe, Denisovans fade from the record without a clear endpoint. Genetic data suggests their populations declined gradually at different times in different regions. Some groups may have vanished early, while others persisted long enough to leave substantial genetic contributions to modern humans. Environmental instability during the late Pleistocene likely played a central role. Rapid climate fluctuations altered ecosystems across Asia, shifting forests, shrinking habitats, and destabilizing food webs. For populations already living at low density, such changes could be catastrophic. Small groups lack buffers against ecological shock. A few failed seasons can end entire lineages. Competition with Homo sapiens added further pressure. Modern humans expanded with larger populations, more complex social networks, and increasingly efficient technologies. Even without direct conflict, sapiens could outcompete Denisovans for resources simply by numbers and coordination. Over time, this imbalance would have favored absorption through interbreeding or gradual displacement. In many cases, Denisovans were not replaced. They were integrated. Their genes flowed into expanding Homo sapiens populations, preserving advantageous adaptations while dissolving Denisovan identity as a distinct group. Extinction in this sense was not a sudden end, but a slow transformation. Denisovans became part of a broader human gene pool, their legacy preserved in fragments rather than forms. Modern techniques continue to reshape their story. Environmental DNA extracted from cave sediments has already identified Denisovan presence in locations where no bones were found. This approach bypasses the need for fossils entirely, allowing researchers to detect ancient humans through microscopic genetic traces left behind in soil. As this method spreads, it may reveal Denisovan occupation across regions once considered archaeologically empty. Each new discovery reinforces the same conclusion. Denisovans were not marginal, primitive, or isolated. They were central players in the evolutionary drama of Eurasia. They adapted to extremes, interacted with multiple human species, and contributed directly to the survival of modern populations. Their invisibility was a matter of preservation, not importance. The Denisovan story forces a redefinition of what it means to leave a legacy. For much of human history, legacy has been associated with tools, art, monuments, and bones. Denisovans left almost none of these. Instead, they left solutions, biological answers to environmental challenges encoded in DNA. High-altitude tolerance, immune resilience, and metabolic adaptations stand as living evidence of their success. In this light, Denisovans represent a different kind of humanity, one that did not dominate landscapes through numbers or architecture, but through quiet endurance and genetic influence. They remind us that evolution does not reward visibility, it rewards survival. And survival, in their case, took the form of inheritance. As the human family tree continues to grow more complex, Denisovans occupy a unique position. They blur the boundary between us and them, showing that modern humans are not the product of a single lineage, but of many intertwined histories. The idea of a pure isolated Homo sapiens collapses under the weight of genetic evidence. Humanity is, and always has been, a mosaic. The final lesson of the Denisovans is not about extinction, but continuity. Though their faces remain unknown and their voices unheard, their biology persists. Every breath taken at high altitude without strain, every immune response shaped by ancient pathogens, carries echoes of a population once thought invisible. Their story does not end in silence. It continues within the living, written into genomes across the world, a reminder that much of what defines humanity comes from ancestors we never knew existed. And as science pushes deeper into the molecular past, it becomes increasingly clear that Denisovans were not an exception, but a preview. Other hidden human lineages almost certainly wait to be discovered, concealed not by time alone, but by our assumptions. The past is far more crowded than we imagined, and the future of human origins research has only just begun. If this journey into hidden human history intrigued you, subscribe for more stories revealed by science, and share this episode with anyone curious about where we truly come from.